All right, today's Triple Take is focusing on the commodity space, and Taylor, weather, of course, playing a big part in what we've been seeing out there, particularly with natural gas having the biggest January gain on record as frigid temperatures swept the Northeast and now apparently sweeping some parts down south as well.
Yeah, not only Texas, but, well, Florida. I'm on a huge rant right now about the stunned iguanas falling from trees. They're so cold, but they recover, I think, when the weather starts to get normal again. Let's try to move from iguanas and weather into, well, a conversation with Jim Roemer. You know him as the president of Best Weather and the author of Weather, Wealth newsletter. And of course, you wrap up trade ideas as well when it comes to commodities and tracking all of this. How are you thinking about nat gas right now, whether it be cold related? We've talked a lot about the geopolitical tensions in Europe with Russia as well. Pretty big gains so far this year for nat gas.
Incredible. We had a record warm December followed by the exact opposite here in the last 2 weeks. And that cold weather is going to continue, I think, right through February and March. And if that happens, there could be a squeeze in natural gas. Maybe prices go to $6.50 or $7. Part of this, though, of course, is the Russian tensions. If things kind of come down in Russia with Ukraine, we could have a spike down initially if things are resolved because, of course, Russia is cutting off some of the exports to Europe right now. So very volatile markets in many commodities, partly because of the weather for sure.
Jim, of course, many brace for January to be cold, and it seemed to leave us hanging until the very end of the month. You, of course, advise a lot of hedge funds, want to be buying your data and the like. Were they wrong-footed?
I'm sorry, were they what?
Wrong-footed?
Run frigid. They've been advised, most of my clients over the last couple of weeks, to do option strategies and to pay attention really to the cold weather, not only in the Northeast, but also in the plains and Southwest, where another major cold wave actually could cause some freezing of wells down in Texas here over the next couple of weeks. So we advise clients all over the world, grain farmers, natural gas producers, and try to give them a heads up before other weather forecast firms change their forecast. Not sure I answered your question. My apologies.
That's okay, Jim. She does that to us all the time. She throws us off. I'm curious here about if you can talk a little bit more about the agricultural side of this. Of course, anytime you see this kind of weather, people start to ask a lot of questions here about what's going on with the crops, whether not only here in the U.S., but, of course, in South America, which is getting some pretty bad weather as well, or unusual weather, I should say.
Yeah, I mean, we have obviously an inflationary spiral in many commodities, and the weather with La Nina, this cold Arctic blast, really adding to that fire. Soybean prices making new highs here on a renewed drought down in South America, particularly Argentina and southern Brazil. Flooding in the northern part of Brazil has hurt the coffee crop. It's hurt the soybean harvest. We have a drought in the wheat growing areas right now. Wheat prices were down quite a bit today because of potential for the Ukraine situation to be eased. If that was to happen with Russia, that's an unknown right now. That could put some pressure on the wheat market right now. But in the medium term, over the next several months, with La Nina, given this cold winter, we could have another drought in parts of the Midwest this spring and summer. If that's the case, on top of the South American weather issues, we could have a raging bull market in many commodities, grains for one of them, and potentially more in the natural gas market in weeks and months ahead. Cocoa, too, starting to get dry in West Africa. They produce 2/3 of the world's chocolate in Ivory Coast and Ghana. That's another area we're also watching for potential bull market down the road.
Round it out for us. Oranges, orange juice.
Orange juice, it's people drink orange juice again to fight COVID. It's very healthy for you. But Florida doesn't have the size of the crop they had 15, 20 years ago because of citrus green. So a frost down here doesn't have the impact of the market like it did back in the 1970s and 1980s when Florida produced 200 million boxes of oranges every year. Now it's less than about 50 to 60. So the weather in Florida, yeah, it's devastatingly cold down here, but it's not really enough to affect the orange juice market right now. The dollar and the strength of the dollar and what Brazil does has more of an impact on the orange juice market.
I mean, yeah, it's been an extraordinary month for oil to have rallied as hard as it has, for commodities to outperform as hard as they have, given the strength of the dollar. So, Jim, really sort of broad perspective there across all of those commodities. We want to thank him, of course, Jim Roemer, Best Weather President. Thank you. Coming up,